Yeah, I just want to talk about Martin Luther. And once again, I need to explain myself because sometimes people get confused. I am not talking about Martin Luther King, the black American civil activist who was assassinated. By the way, Martin Luther King died in hospital. He didn't die on the balcony where he was shot. There were some, I think there were FBI or CIA agents that visited the hospital and shooed all the nurses out and then suffocated them with a pillow. So he died in a hospital. But I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about Martin Luther, the German, the one who was a German monk and he was one of the reformers. But before I get to Martin Luther, I wanted to just mention that there were other Protestant reformers before Martin Luther. There was John Huss, who was from Bohemia, which today is called the Czech Republic. He was burnt on the stake for criticizing the Catholic Church. And don't forget, he was, for those maybe who don't know, John Huss was actually a Roman Catholic. You'll find what you'll find when you read your history is that you find that most of the reformers were actually former Catholics themselves. It's been said, I've read in some books that Roman Catholics, when they convert and become Protestant, they're the ones who are really on fire and will spread the truth more fervently than those who were born free, if so to speak. Those who were born in spiritual bondage are more likely to be on fire for God than those who were born free, because they appreciate the fact that they've been set free by the truth. So I just wanted to mention some characters who were historical characters who were there before Martin Luther. I've already mentioned John Huss, John Wycliffe as well, who was an English reformer, also a Catholic as well, who translated the Bible, the Latin Bible, into English, but it had some errors because it was translated from the Latin Bible, which the Latin Vulgate, if I remember correctly. I'm actually doing this as a test for myself to see if I can do this video, mainly talking about Martin Luther, but also talking about other characters as well, to see if I actually know my history. I want to do this without without doing notes. So yeah, there was John Wycliffe, and who preceded Martin Luther. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that it's been said many, many times, and especially by, even Roman Catholics who say that, they'll say that, Roman Catholicism precedes Protestantism because, Martin Luther only came along in 1517 and nailed the 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg in Germany. So the Catholic Church precedes Protestantism, so therefore Catholicism is right and Protestantism is wrong. Correct, that's incorrect because first of all, say that Jesus was a Protestant. He protested the teachings and the corruptions of the Jewish church leaders. Jesus was not a Roman Catholic. Okay, there was no such thing as Roman Catholicism when Jesus was alive. So, secondly, the Protestant Reformation was started by the Waldenses. The Waldenses were a group of Christians from France and Italy who had the accurate manuscripts of the Holy Scriptures, which they actually translated or copied. And then they also were involved in trade. They used to go around selling things. But what they used to do, because the distributing the Holy Scriptures was actually illegal in Europe, because the Catholic Church ruled Europe at that point. So they used to hide copies of the maybe they'll write like a few chapters of the Holy Scriptures. They would hide those in their clothes, and then they were selling their wares. They would then offer whoever was buying things from them. They would offer them copies, chapters of the Holy Scriptures. So the Waldenses actually are the ones who spread Christianity in Europe before Martin Luther came along. And the Waldenses, another argument against this belief that Catholicism precedes Protestantism, is that the Waldenses actually existed as well before the Catholic Church existed. That's why there's this this false theory that the Waldenses are named after Peter Waldo, who was also Waldensian, but that's not true. They preceded Peter Waldo by a long way. So this is some of this is said to try and make it look like the Waldenses came a long way after the Catholic Church was already there, because obviously the Catholic Church wants to claim that they are the only true church and they've been there for a long time before any other Christian church. It's not true. We do seem to have this thing of thinking that if something is older, it's better, because even that argument is used when it comes to talking about or debating the issue of Bible manuscripts. They'll say that the Codex Vaticanus and the Codex Sinaiticus are the oldest manuscripts, therefore we should use them. But what you find is that there were Bibles that were translated from the received text, which is the majority text, way before the Vaticanus and Sinaiticus were used to translate modern day Bibles, because especially when it comes to English Bibles, most of the new versions of new Bible versions were translated after 1890, but before that they were not used. They didn't use these manuscripts that they're using nowadays. So anyway, yeah, the Waldenses existed before the Catholic Church, and they translated or copied manuscripts from accurate manuscripts. Let me say it again. They copied the Bible from accurate manuscripts. So and because of that, really important thing, because of that, the Waldenses were actually persecuted, by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church sent armies to kill them because of that, because they were kind of like not bowing to the papacy. So anyway, just to clarify that issue, because most Christians, some Christians don't even know anything about the Protestant Reformation, and for those who do know about it, they have this belief, especially English Christians. They want to claim that Protestantism started in England with John Wycliffe. That's not true. It started with the Waldenses. So anyway, there were individuals and groups that came up and spoke out against the corruptions of the Catholic Church. Eventually, we get to Martin Luther, a German monk, who I believe was born in the late 1400s. He was Roman Catholic, or his family was Roman Catholic, and he came from a poor family, but his dad managed to make a bit of money when he went into mining, and Martin Luther's dad wanted Martin to become a lawyer, and he actually started studying to be a lawyer. But then one day, there's a day when all this changed. He had gone to visit a friend, and then on his way back to I think the school where he was studying, there was a storm, with lots of lightning, and Martin Luther thought he was going to die that day because the lightning was striking quite close to him, and he basically, in fear, knelt down and prayed that if God would save his life, or if God would spare him, he would become a monk. Because, in Catholicism, it's like the best thing you can ever be in life is a priest. It's similar to the SDA Church. It's like the best thing you can ever be as an Adventist is become a pastor. And one of my brothers is actually a pastor. But it's like, you don't need to go to a seminary for God to speak to you. God even speaks to children. God just needs someone who's humble for him to communicate with. Because when you are full of much learning and you think you know everything, that's when God is furthest away from you. If you look at the disciples, they were fishermen, most of them, and look at how they turned the world upside down. So, yeah. So Martin Luther made a promise that if God spared his life, he would become a monk, and that's what he did. He changed career path and basically started studying to become a monk. And obviously his dad wasn't very happy with that, because his dad had been paying for his university fees and stuff like that. So, and what normally happens is when someone is training to become a priest in the Catholic Church is that they don't study the Holy Scriptures. So one day Martin Luther came across a Bible in the chapel and started reading it, and obviously his eyes were then open to the fact that Catholicism is not Christianity, because the Christianity that he was reading about in the Holy Scriptures was not the same as that which was being practiced by Martin Luther himself, or by the Catholics, or by the Pope. And there was also a time when Martin Luther went to Rome. He was sent to Rome, and to him it was like an honor, to go to Rome. But when he got there, he realized that Rome was filthy, and he said that he actually made this statement where he said that if there is a hell, Rome is built on top of it, and because there were prostitutes in Rome, and even the priests were basically having sexual relations with the prostitutes, and the Catholic Church was practicing simony, which is where the selling of things, of spiritual things for money. And this is one of the things that led Martin Luther to write his 95 Theses, because later on, as his eyes were opened more and more, the issue of indulgences, caused him, like, once again, like I said already, to write the 95 Theses. He was against the selling of these indulgences. For those who don't understand, are like, basically it's like a ticket that you buy to get your relatives out of purgatory. And purgatory itself doesn't exist, because it's not even mentioned in the Holy Scriptures. Purgatory is like a halfway place between hell and heaven, where you burn some of your sins before proceeding to heaven. And also, purgatory can also, the indulgences, you can also buy an indulgence, so that when you die and go to purgatory, once again, which doesn't exist, you can avoid going to purgatory, or you won't spend much time there. So there were these priests who were selling indulgences in Germany, and they were selling indulgences in other European countries. But Martin Luther this made Martin Luther very angry, because he could see that the poor people of Germany were having their money basically robbed from them through a deception called the indulgences. So he wrote 95 Theses, basically, or 95 arguments against, not just mainly about the indulgences, but against the other practices of the Catholic Church. And he nailed this to the church door in a place called Wittenberg in Germany. And his intention was not to start an argument with the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. He just wanted the people in Wittenberg to read his theses and realize that they were being deceived, so that they would stop giving money to the Catholic Church through the sale of or buying of indulgences. But someone took down his 95 Theses, and the copies were made, and within a short space of time, those copies were spread throughout Europe. And also, quite an important figure that came along before Martin Luther by divine providence was Johannes Gutenberg, who had invented the Gutenberg press that allowed Martin Luther's 95 Theses to be reproduced very quickly. So they spread all over Europe, and because of that, Martin Luther became a marked man. The Catholic Church wasn't happy with him, and the Pope at the time, Pope Leo X, I believe, wasn't happy with him. So Martin Luther was called a diet. So in a place called Worms, but spelled Worms. So in English it looks like worms, the diet of worms. It's not like it was a diet of worms and they were eating worms. No, a diet was a meeting where he was called to explain himself and to see whether he would stick to what he believed, or whether he would recant. To recant is basically to say, okay, I'm sorry, I take that back. I'm still a Roman Catholic, and I'm going to continue to be a faithful Roman Catholic. So that's what they wanted Martin Luther to recant. Not only the stuff that he had written in the 95 Theses, but other things that he had written as well, because he had written some books or pamphlets. So when he went to this meeting, someone even told him not to go, because, when John Huss was also called to a meeting, he was betrayed, because he had been promised that he would have a safe conduct, that he would not be arrested. But as soon as John Huss arrived, in that place, in that city where they were supposed to have that meeting, he was arrested and thrown into a dungeon. So Martin Luther had been warned by his friends not to go to this, to this diet in Worms, but he went, and he was not arrested, and he managed to actually to argue his position. But actually, the first day that he went there and he was confronted about what he had written and stuff, he asked for more time to consider how he would respond. But the next time when they met, he did say that in some of his writings he had been a bit too harsh towards his opponents, but then he said that he would not recant anything, even with all the pressure. Remember that he was dealing here with the leaders of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church and the leaders of the Roman Empire, because the emperor at the time of the Roman Empire was actually there as well at this meeting. Martin Luther refused to change course or to recant anything, and he was allowed to go free. But on his way back home, he was kidnapped, and initially it was thought that he had been kidnapped by his enemies and that he was going to be killed. But he was taken to a castle by those who wanted to protect him. And whilst there, he managed to translate the Bible into German, into the German language. Just remember that at this time, it was illegal, in quotes, illegal, to translate God's word into different languages. The Bible was mostly in Latin, and in fact it was the Latin Vulgate, which was a corrupt version of the Bible, which basically mostly aligned with Catholic beliefs. So, but Martin Luther didn't use the Latin Vulgate. He used the Textus Receptus, which just shows you that that's why we shouldn't be reading these modern Bible versions like the NIV and the Good News Bible and the Revised Standard Version, the American Standard Version. All these new, for those who are watching this and who are still using these new Bible versions, please do your research. If the Bible that you're using is, try and find out which manuscripts is the Bible that you're using translated from. If it's not translated from the Textus Receptus, like the KJV and the Geneva, then I'm not saying you should throw it away. Just, put it aside and then get yourself a Geneva Bible and a King James Version and compare what's in your modern Bible to what is in the King James or the Geneva Bible. So, Martin Luther translated God's word into German for those who could read German, but he was a marked man, and eventually there was also a peasants' revolt in Germany, which was blamed on Martin Luther. They said that the peasants were revolting because of Martin Luther had basically said that they need to set themselves free from bondage to the bourgeoisie or the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. But Martin Luther wasn't involved in that peasants' revolt, and he actually basically called for those who were behind the peasants' revolt to stop the violence. So so eventually there were other meetings that took place which Martin Luther did not take part in, because he knew that his life was in danger if he had gone to take part in those meetings. But basically the princes, remember that Germany was actually split into, what we know as Germany today was actually made up of different provinces, or even maybe kingdoms, if we can call them that. There are princes that went to the meetings that took place afterwards, and a lot of these princes had read Martin Luther's writings, and I believe they had also read God's word and had come to the understanding that Catholicism was a false religion, and when they were told basically that they needed to submit themselves to the Catholic Church and also to the emperor, they refused and basically said, would rather die than do that. And because of that, Germany slowly started becoming free. But interestingly, like I mentioned in one of my other videos, where I spoke about why the world will never have peace, I mentioned that, I mentioned the 30 Years' War, which was... so I can't remember the exact time periods when that was fought, but it was in the 1600s. I think it was was it 1618 to 1648? Just maybe check that. You guys can check that as well. Don't research everything that I'm saying. Don't just go by what I'm saying. So I was trying to make the point that the 30 Years' War was actually a religious war between Protestants and Catholics, where the Catholic Church was so grieved by how she had lost, if I can call it territory, to Protestants, because what gives the Catholic Church power is people, and it's also ignorance as well. Like Samuel Moore said, the food of popery is ignorance. So when a lot of Europeans left the Catholic Church and became Lutherans or Calvinists or Methodists, or they became part of the Church of England, the Catholic Church was almost destroyed basically because of the Protestant Reformation. So Martin Luther basically freed Germany from bondage to the Catholic Church. But so I was talking about the 30 Years' War, because I wanted to mention that that World War I and World War II is also called by some historians, it's called the Second 30 Years' War. Because actually that was also a religious war as well, where many Protestants were killed. But the problem this time with World War I and World War II is that those who took part in World War I and World War II, who were from Protestant countries, such as the UK and even Germany itself as well. There are parts of Germany which were still Protestant, even during Hitler's time, and also Americans as well. A lot of them didn't realize they were fighting a religious war. But so I mentioned that in my video where I spoke about why the world will never have peace. I mentioned that places like Dresden in Germany were heavily bombed because it was known to have lots of Protestants. Apparently a very beautiful city that was bombed, yet it did not have any military installations. So this is what these wars were about, really. And even some of the wars that are going on today, it's about basically trying to destroy Christianity and to destroy truth and bring the whole world back to bondage to the Catholic Church, so that everyone will bow the knee to the Pope. And like it says in Revelation 13, verse 3 and verse 8 and 9, I believe, it says that the whole world wandered after the beast. So there will come a time when those whose names are not written in the book of life will follow the papacy. This is the whole aim. And remember, some have referred to the Catholic Church as the devil's girlfriend. And Ellen White refers to Ellen White being one of the pioneers of the SDA Church, said that the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church is the devil's masterpiece. It's disguised as a church, but it's as a Christian church, but it's not. So yeah, so I'm making this video, and this is the part of the series that I'm doing, talking about men who, 12 men who made history. I would say Martin Luther made history because he changed so many things in the world, not only in Germany, but even some of the freedoms that we enjoy, were because of men like Martin Luther. And I've also spoken about where our rights come from, and some will say that our rights come from, the government. Some will say that we got our rights from the Protestant Reformation. No, we got our rights from God. All the Protestant Reformations, the reformers, what the Protestant reformers did is they basically re-emphasized the fact that we get our rights from God. We already had our rights by the time these men came up in history, but they just wrote books and protested the oppressive, tactics of the Catholic Church, where Roman Catholics were made to believe that a priest can forgive them of their sins, that they need to bow before another man. So the reformers basically, set us free from ignorance and bondage to the Catholic Church. And I would say, yeah, definitely Martin Luther is one of the great men that has ever lived. So but there's a war that's going on, and unfortunately most Christians are asleep. They don't realize that a lot of these things that are going on around the world, whether it be wars or the scamdemic or the climate change hoax, all this is about basically taking the world back to how it was during the dark ages, when the Catholic Church had a lot of power. It's been said that um, it's like the Dark Ages was the noon. It was the noon of the Catholic Church. It was noon for the Catholic Church or something like that. But it was darkness for the Christians. So this is what's really going on. Yeah. I just wanted to definitely share um, something about Martin Luther, because it definitely contributed to history as we know it. Maybe just add a few more things that obviously when Martin Luther was an Augustinian monk, he wasn't married because Roman Catholic priests are not allowed to marry, which is also something that's unbiblical. They believe in priestly celibacy, but he did go on to marry, and he had some kids, and he also went on to write many books, such as one called Table Talk, where he actually speaks against the heliocentric spinning globe Earth. And there are many other things that he mentions in that book. That's not the only thing he mentions. But he also went on to say on many in many of his books and many of his writings that the Pope was Antichrist. So nowadays we have this confusion amongst Christians that some believe that the Antichrist was Antiochus Epiphanes or Epiphanes, a Greek king. And some believe that the Antichrist is coming in the future. No, those two beliefs are actually based on the false teachings of two Jesuit priests. One was called Alcazar, the other one was called Ribera. They are the ones who came up with preterism and futurism. In other words, preterism being that the Antichrist has already been, and then futurism, that the Antichrist is coming in the future. But Martin Luther nailed it and said that the Pope was Antichrist, and that the office of the Pope was very Antichrist. That's the third teaching on who the Antichrist is. It's called the historicist position, believing that the Pope is Antichrist. None of this thing of the Pope being in the past and the Pope being in the future. That comes from Jesuits, and obviously the Jesuits were founded in 1540. So not very long after Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg. That was in 1517, and then the Diet of Worms, which I've mentioned already, was in 1521, and then soon afterwards you can see that the Jesuits were formed. Just literally a few years afterwards, you can see that the devil basically brought up the Jesuits to fight against Protestantism, which is another way maybe of defining what Protestantism is basically belief in the Bible is the only creed and the only rule of faith. So the devil obviously is fighting against Christianity because the Bible is true. So because what we have to remember is that it's not like the Jesuits just all of a sudden came up in 1540. No, Ignatius Loyola, who was the one that founded the Jesuits, went through a bit of training. He actually read some books, and he went through what's called the spiritual exercises, which are still done today. And the amazing thing is that even Protestant, so-called Protestant pastors, and even Protestants in general, they actually take part in the spiritual exercises. Maybe not understanding that it's actually comes from the Jesuits, and it actually leads to demonic possession. And excuse me, anyone who takes part in the spiritual exercises becomes the one of the things is that they become submissive to the Pope of Rome. So there's an SDA pastor who's now late who wrote a book saying that spiritual formation makes you more submissive to the Pope of Rome. So I was just explaining that Ignatius Loyola actually went through all this training and started getting a following, because when Ignatius Loyola went to meet with Pope Paul III, he went there with 6 of his friends, and obviously now there are thousands and thousands of Jesuits, some of whom are going around pretending to be Protestants. Right now in the today's Sabbath, there are Jesuit priests in the SDA church and in all Sabbath-keeping churches who are pretending to be Protestants because they want to return the whole world to how it was in the Dark Ages when the Catholic Church was ruling Europe. So that's where we are. After Martin Luther came along, a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world is actually it's a war against what the Protestant reformers did, and the Jesuits are actually gaining a lot of ground. They've been very successful in everything that they are doing. So if we don't, and it's been said that if we forget our history, we're bound to repeat it. And also, if we don't know our history, we won't understand how we came to be where we are today. So it's very important to understand our history. So yeah, Martin Luther is also one of the men, one of the 12 men who contributed or who made history. I think it wouldn't be right not to mention him because he definitely had an impact. And even today we still have the Lutheran Church, which is named after him.